stand together, we'll never fall. We can make a difference.
Well, hi there and welcome back to another episode of the All Around Growth Podcast, a show where the only constant is change. My name is Rob Kaiser and I am your host. Today is Tuesday, August 22nd, 2023, and this is episode number 512 of a show that, like I said, where the only constant is change. I realized that this morning as I made some preparations for today's show, was thinking about recording, but the reality is that my preparations for the show involve no preparation for the show. This is going to be more of a coffee talk episode, an episode where I finish my final cup of coffee for the morning before getting to work here on the homestead at York Meadow Farm. If you're listening to this and you're not familiar with York Meadow Farm and you want to learn more about what we do here on the farm, then feel free to check out yorkmeadowfarm.com and learn more about the homestead, learn more about what we do, why we do it, or at least what we do, who does it here, and why we do it. I guess there may be some information there within the blog posts that try to identify, or at least articulate and try to identify, articulate past attempts at, and most of those blog posts are written by me. You can also sign up for the email newsletter, and see all of the email newsletters in the past. Most of those in recent years, most of the email newsletters have been turned into blog posts to try and broaden the content base that is contained within the website. And some of this question about why we do what we do, why I do specifically what I do, it's been on my mind. It's been weighing heavily on my mind over the past few days, past week or so. And that's a good thing, and it's also a challenging thing. It is something that has, the big question of why is nothing new for me to ponder, to think about. The big question of why really began to, fester. It's not, I guess for me personally, the big question of why has always been something that I've pondered and thought about as for the entirety of my life, dating back to when I was a teenager and actually began to think in a manner consistent of something resembling adult thinking. I can think back to the age of 13 and 14 and why this and why that. And at the age of 13 I had my first seizure and was diagnosed with epilepsy, and that really may have been one of the contributing factors to me asking why so much. Why do I have seizures? Why have I been afflicted with this thing? Why? And the reality is there were a lot of things that I did over the course of my adult life to escape from asking that question why. A lot of activities and behaviors engaged in to get me out of me so that I wouldn't think about that so much. But I think that's maybe the most important question that we can ask ourselves is, why do we do what we do, right? What drives us to do what we do? So, in thinking about this over the past few days, I guess that's what this episode is going to turn into. Why do I do what I do? So the question is, really, before I can even get into that, is what is it that I do? I live here at York Meadow Farm. I have a small business. I run a business, and the primary thing that I do with my business is perform contract labor for my biggest customer, who is York Meadow Farm. Now, last year, when I entered the world of self-employment for the first time, I did contract labor for a couple other businesses in addition to York Meadow Farm for a brief amount of time. And really the extent of that was operating equipment, doing some simple project work, running a tractor, brush hogging a field or two or three or however many I did. And that was it. Simple labor work, manual labor work. And I did that, some of it at least, before I decided to jump in with both. I did some of that immediately after quitting my job, because I thought, okay, I've quit my job. I don't have any way to make money. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm scared. So I did some work for a couple of weeks and continued to make some money, just like going to a job. And that didn't really work out. It's kind of funny. I won't get into the details of that, but let's just say it didn't work out. And in June, I decided that there is no other choice. I was planning on leaving my job so that I could work with my dad full time and help grow this family business. And the bulk of what was taking place with the family business, the bulk of the sales that were taking place, that is, were through his fermented food operation. Now, Mom also makes bath and body products, but the reality is, at this point in time, they don't sell as much as the fermented foods, and they weren't at that time either. And at this point in time, almost 3 years ago, we had scheduled we scheduled a tour of a local fermented food operation to see what they were doing, because at that time in September of 2020, and even prior, we were confident in the product and the desire in the marketplace for it, that we could scale up and actually give it a go and see what we could do with it. While we were thinking about that, that was maybe 2019. And then, 2020 happened, and the big event, if you will, COVID. So needless to say, our initial plans earlier in the year for the scheduled tour were postponed. And by the time things became a little less scary in September, everyone was in a position to get back to normal after the giant pandemic, which really didn't seem to last more than just a few months, because, well, by September of 2020, we were taking a tour of the facility and basically operating, here in Northeast Ohio as though there was nothing wrong in the first place. And ironically, not ironically, that was also when this show became what it is. That's when I started recording consistently, and that's when I created the podcast. So here we are, 512 episodes after the fact, and what used to be a daily recording turned into a weekly recording at times, and the frequency has been inconsistent. A lot of things with the show have been inconsistent, and I guess the reality is that's in large part because the nature of my life since 2020 has been inconsistent, and you may identify with that if you're listening to this. You may have some inconsistencies with your life. But nevertheless, here we are. So, and here I am. Back to the question of what is it that I do? Well, I own my own business, performing contract labor for York Meadow Farm. And, the nature of York Meadow Farm has changed. A few months ago, Dad was diagnosed with cancer. A couple months after that, he passed away. Just a couple days ago, it had been 3 months since Dad died. And it doesn't really seem like that. The new normal has set in, and it's still a little bit weird. The business has been going well. Sales have been going well. Without a doubt, this has been the best year in terms of sales of fermented foods to date. We are in more retail locations. We are not at the number of markets that we've been at in the past. By this time last year, I think it wasn't quite this time last year. The last 3 farmers markets, it was more like in September when we went up to the Tremont market. And Tremont is it's right on the outskirts of the Cleveland metropolitan area. It's a little neighborhood in Cleveland, and we were trying to expand. We were trying to grow, and that seemed like the next logical step because Cody is a vendor up there at the Tremont Farmers Market, and we did very, very well. Now, this year, part of the original plan was to be up there every week at that market, but like I said, Dad got sick, Dad passed away, things changed. We went behind production basically was delayed for the entire duration that Dad was sick, and the first couple of months after his death were very, very much a time of playing catch up, of grinding out production and spending long hours in the kitchen making product, packing product, trying to get caught up. And finally, we've reached a point where we've gotten caught up, and the time has come to address some of these other business related things that were initially topics of discussion late last year. And some of those topics of discussion were, rebranding the product name to have more focus put on the fermented food line, and working through some, administrative issues, not issues per se, but the entire structure of the business. And that had to do a lot with insurance and the fact that we not only had food products here as part of the York Meadow Farm operations, but also bath and body products. And the long and short of it is that it was suggested that we break out those 2 product lines and have them operate under separate and distinct companies, and have each of those companies insured separately to save money on insurance. And that has been part of what has been being worked on over the past couple of months as well, as and introducing the new brand of natural ferments. And essentially what is going to happen is I am going to, at least at this point in time, this could change. I don't really know. And now I'm starting to, question that a little bit after this past market on Saturday, when some people were asking about the kraut guy and is this the same thing, and what happened to the kraut guy. People that weren't aware. There are still some people, some customers from years past that aren't aware of Dad's death. Some people in the community that weren't really that aren't too close to us, that aren't following us on social media, that aren't recipients of the newsletter. People that were, hey, is this the kraut guy? Are you the kraut guy? What happened to the kraut guy? Is this the same product? Is this still as good? Is this that? This, that, and the other thing. So there's a little bit of reservation, hesitation on my part about, am I doing the right thing? Is this the right way to go? And so that's what I'm doing. And then the question was posited to me earlier, just a few days ago, late last week. Why am I doing this? Like, specifically with regard to fermented foods. And it's someone that I know, not all that well. Somebody out there that is probably listening to this, and they asked me, why do you do what you do, specifically with regard to fermented foods? And the reality is, I didn't know how to answer that question. And so I'm going to ask you, the listener, right now, why do you do what you do? And as I answer why I do what I do, maybe that will help you shed some light on the question that you should be asking yourself. Why do you do what you do? Well, here's why I do what I do. I'm in a position with my family where this land was purchased 15 years ago. And the intent behind the purchase of this land was not to have a homestead, was not to do anything other than to serve as a parcel where my parents could build their dream retirement home. And they were going to continue farming out the land to the person that had previously leased it. They were going to build way in the back and just have a nice place, have their dream retirement home. And the long and short of it is, housing market crashed, and shortly after they bought the property, plans to build were delayed, and everything started to change. And I moved back from California after having some change of heart in why I was doing what I was doing out there, and realized that my family is important to me. I appreciate what they're doing at the farmers market. They had just started attending the farmers market in 2011. I was watching them do that, being the remote social media manager in California, and I realized, you know what? Some changes in my life occurred out there. I'm going to move back home, and I'm going to help grow the homestead. And we did a number of things over the years to do that, from market gardening to microgreens to some experimentation with ducks and raising ducks while we didn't live here. And all of these things had some level of success, but nothing really stuck for the long term, except the bath and body products and the fermented foods. And those are the two things that are taking place right now. So why do I do this? Well, like I said, there was this land base here. Mom and Dad started to do something with it. Mom and Dad were also getting older. I'm been on this continual process of figuring out what it is that I want to do with my life. And a large part of that was, I think I'd like to try being a homesteader, whatever that means. Being more self-sufficient than I currently am. Because when I first came up with this idea of being a homesteader, I was not self-sufficient at all. Am I more self-sufficient than I was at that point when I first had this dream? Yes. Am I as self-sufficient as I want to be? No. Is this an ongoing process? Yes. Do I have to continue to change? Yes. But in order to change, I have to have a plan. And previously, to get to where I am now, I had one. There is a plan, but that plan right now is very limited in scope to the business. The business, which isn't mine, which I'm still managing, and we're in the process of transitioning so that I not only manage it, but it is my business. And that's a process. We're basically, in effect, transferring ownership and restructuring it in a way that may be more complicated in the long run. And these are some things and conversations that need to be had so I can work through this. Is it worth trying to run two businesses independently and separately, or is it worth having a larger insurance policy that covers one? I don't know. I've already taken steps to execute on two independent businesses, so maybe that's the way to go since we've already started moving in that direction. It really isn't that big of a deal, but it also is kind of a big deal. But that still doesn't answer the question of why do I do what I do specifically with regard to the fermented foods. Well, the reason why is because that's what was being done here. And whether it was fermented foods, whether it was baked goods, whether it was a service, for example, if my dad was a mechanic, or he was a carpenter, or whatever the case may be, I would have come home and worked under him to learn those skills necessary to carry on the thing that he started. Because I guess in short, what I want to do is carry on a family legacy that never was that. My parents, my father specifically, started building something. And I know a lot of families, not a lot, but I've come to know other families who have a generational legacy structure intact. Some of them are sixth generation farmers. Some of them are, other, maybe not sixth, but they're multi-generation farming families. Homesteader families. They're more farming families with a farm business. They're businessmen at this point. And not so much what I would consider farmers. Others are more farmers and less so businessmen. And I'm not sure. I'm certainly not a farmer. I'm not entirely sure if I want to be a businessman, but I don't think I can accomplish my goals of being a homesteader unless I am a businessman and unless I am in some ways a farmer. I may have a farm. I may not be a farmer in the conventional sense of the word, but I have to incorporate elements of farming into the overall plan of what it takes to have an operational homestead. And I certainly can't do it alone. There are people here doing things that they do. That's primarily Cody. And this season we've had somebody else here. And the status of him is uncertain. I'm not sure what the future holds. He may be doing other things elsewhere now. And I have some regrets about not getting to know him as well as I could have. And hopefully I can change that as time goes on. When I see him, I can make a concerted effort to talk to him more and figure out what his plans are and why he's doing what he's doing. And these are some questions that I asked Cody too, to pick his brain and understand what motivates him, what drives him. And these are questions that, I have for you, and I'd like to engage the audience with this, engage you. And you're welcome to chime in on any of the social media channels where you can find the show: Twitter, Facebook, Telegram. If you search for All Around Growth, you'll find us there. We're definitely more active on Telegram than we are on other social media platforms, but it's there for people that are interested in those social media platforms. Also on Instagram. Why do you do what you do? And maybe that'll be the title of today's show. Why do you do what you do? For me, it's simply trying to build a legacy, build something that can be passed on, carried down for future generations, and something that might allow someone else to come here, sustain themselves and their families, which is what Cody's doing, but the resources are here for other people to do that as well in some way, shape, or form. And hopefully as time goes on, we can continue to develop that and turn that into something that is conducive to other people doing exactly that. How we go about doing that, I'm not entirely sure. And really why I do what I do, it all started with simply being of service and helping someone grow their own dream. And that was my dad and my mom. And they may not have even really been sure what their dream was. And I tried to have that conversation with my dad at some point, but I think by the time I got to asking him that real question, is like, what is your dream? What is your vision? He was sick. And the reality is he couldn't really answer that. So these are questions I've got to ask myself now, because he's not here. I can ask those questions to my mom, but I don't know. I think what they wanted to do was, initially, it was have their retirement home and, grow old living here, spending time with family. And that's exactly what is happening, but not really in the way that they expected. And this was long before Dad got sick too. Didn't happen in the way that they were expecting. So can I still accomplish my why, being of service? Of course. Of course. But how do I go about doing that? Well, I guess it's putting really doing what I did last week, because there's a lot going on. So I just started listing off these things on a piece of paper, on a clipboard, on a legal pad. And, certainly the things that are on my mind are things that are important. And that list continued to grow longer. And every day, some of those things get crossed off and more things get added. But that's not really how we go about accomplishing, or at the very least, formulating a plan. So perhaps that's the next step, is formulating a plan. Or maybe that'll be the next, or one of the next topics in a future episode, is how do you formulate a plan? If you've figured out your why, where do you go from here? What do you do with it? Right? And looking back, while I was living out west, I had figured out my why. And I I put together a plan, an exit strategy to leave where I was, how I was going to make enough money to get to where I needed to be, and what I was going to do when I got there. The harsh reality is that that plan has come to fruition. The plan from 10 years ago. I accomplished the goal that I had. And that goal was to be self-employed. I didn't know what I was going to do. 10 years ago, fermented foods weren't in the equation. 10 years ago, bath and body products weren't really in the equation either. But I wanted to do something. I wanted to have a business. I wanted to run a business. I wanted to be wholly responsible for the management of my own life in terms of generating income, generating, actions on decisions that were made and making those decisions and simply assuming responsibility for what it was that I was doing. And that's where I'm at. Is it as successful as I wished it would have been? No. That's okay. What do we do now? And I find myself thinking about that and then thinking, well, where do I want to be 10 years from now? And that's the big question. I don't know. Trying to navigate through this life right now. Work through a lot of changes that have taken place. And ultimately trying to give myself some grace as I do so, especially over the past couple of days. Yesterday specifically, having basically taken a day off, not really done a whole lot of anything. Even took a nap in the middle of the day. Tried not to feel guilty about it. But been grinding the past few months. Somewhat caught up. Last week was a catch-up week in terms of packing what's in production. This week is going to be somewhat of a catch-up week, doing a little bit of cleanup in the kitchen after the installation of a water filter, which will help streamline, operations a little bit when it comes to water filtration and making brines in large quantity for soaking of cabbage when it comes to kimchi production, and the limited amount of pickles that we do. That will make things a lot easier. Many thanks to my brother for helping that get in place and securing an excellent filtration system and reverse osmosis system, something that was purchased at online auctions, liquidation sales. If you have any questions about that, let me know. Happy to talk about that in depth. The website that was used to buy this particular piece, where you can also find things at auction, things that are quite frequently Amazon returns, things that are generally intact. It's oftentimes a crapshoot. We lucked out with this one. The only thing that was missing was a fitting on the bottom of the faucet that was installed, and it was something that was easily picked up at Home Depot and slightly modified with a heat gun to ensure that it was installed correctly. And again, kudos to my brother for having the wherewithal to think this out and figure it out. And I just simply helped him, again, being of service, him helping me achieve what it is that we need to do. Was it a need? No. Was it helpful? Yes. It's going to definitely save a few hours a week and streamline processes. And those hours during the weeks can be applied to different aspects of the business. And that's really what it's all about, is streamlining what it is that we're currently doing now so that we can focus time, effort, and energy on something else to continue growing. Because at the end of the day, guys, if we're not growing, we're dying. And with that, that is about it for today's show. The cup of coffee is almost done. And I hope that you enjoyed this off-the-cuff episode of today. I hope it was as thought-provoking for you as the past few days have been for me. I appreciate you guys that listen to this show, that give me some tough questions to think about, because, those of you who ask these hard questions, while I may not know you all that well, I have a lot of respect for you. What I do know about you, the path that you're on, and it's admirable. And it inspires me to think differently, do more, change more, and grow more. And I think at the end of the day, that's really what this show is all about. All around growth. Growth and development in all aspects of life. Financial, physical, personal development, family, spiritual, social, and career. Because if we're not living a balanced life, we can't grow. And if we're not growing, we're dying. This is Rob Kaiser. Have a great week ahead, guys. Thank you very much, and God bless.
In a world of pain, what can I do? The needs are many and answers are few. People turn away and I wonder why. If I can help somebody, then I want to try. People may think that it's odd that I believe in friendship and love. And truth is always the best way to the world that may seem odd. I'm an odd fellow. I'm an odd fellow. Whoa, whoa. I'm an odd fellow. If we stand together, we'll never fall. We can make a difference and answer the call. And know the times are wasting every day, and we can help somebody along the way. People may think that it's odd that I believe in friendship and love. Truth is always the best way to the world that may seem odd. I'm an odd fellow. You're an